The proposal happened during a trip that already felt heavy from the moment we arrived. We flew across the country to visit his family on the West Coast. It was supposed to be a vacation, a break from work, a chance to relax, reconnect, and spend time together. His parents had offered their house, insisting it would be easier for everyone. We arrived with gifts, trying to be polite, grateful, and respectful. I told myself to be flexible. This was important to him. From the first day, I felt like I was being evaluated. His mother watched everything I did. How I wiped the counters. How I loaded the dishwasher. At one point, she took a plate out of my hands and said, "No, that's not how we clean here." When I offered to help, it was never right. When I stepped back, I was told I should be more proactive. His father made comments that were framed as jokes but landed like small cuts. "So, you don't usually wake up this late, do you? You eat bread like that? In this house, we don't drink wine in the afternoon." We were on vacation. We wanted to open a bottle of wine one evening, just the two of us, to unwind. His parents immediately shut it down. "Why do you need alcohol? That's unnecessary." The bottle stayed closed. I felt like a child asking for permission. They insisted we do everything together, every meal, every outing. Or rather, the lack of outings. They didn't like restaurants. They didn't like bars. They didn't like sightseeing. When we suggested going out, they acted offended, as if we were rejecting them personally. So we stayed in, day after day, sitting in the same living room, the same conversations, the same quiet judgment. By the third day, I felt small, watched, wrong. This was the trip he chose for the proposal. And already I felt like I was surviving it, not enjoying it. By the second half of the trip, I was constantly on edge. I started second-guessing every small thing I did. I asked before opening cabinets. I asked before using the washing machine. I asked before sitting down, before resting, before existing. I could feel their eyes on me, tracking my movements, waiting for something else to correct. His mother would sigh loudly when I did something wrong. She'd redo it in front of me without saying a word, wiping the counter again, rearranging the dishes I had just put away, folding a towel differently and placing it back on the pile. The message was clear. You are doing it wrong. You don't belong here. Once, when I tried to clean up after dinner, she stopped me and said, "You missed a spot. Look." She pointed it out with her finger, like a teacher scolding a student. Another time, she laughed and said, "Well, in this family, we do things properly." I didn't know how to respond. I just smiled and nodded, swallowing the embarrassment. His father would chime in with comments that felt harmless on the surface but stuck with me all day. "So, you don't cook much, do you? You're very relaxed about things. Back home, people are a bit more disciplined." I stopped feeling like a guest. I felt like a test. What hurt the most was that my fiancé didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. When I tried to gently suggest going out alone, just for an hour, his parents reacted immediately. "Why would you want to leave? We barely get to see you." We already made plans. Plans meant sitting in the house. Again. So I stayed quiet. I told myself not to make waves, not to be dramatic, not to ruin anything. This trip was important to him. I could endure it. But every correction, every comment, every look made me feel less like a future wife, and more like someone who would never be good enough. And deep down, I started to dread whatever surprise he had planned. The breaking point came the night before the proposal. It happened after another small humiliation, another correction in the kitchen, another reminder that no matter what I did, it was wrong. I put a pan down a little too hard, and that was when he noticed something was off. I finally let myself say it out loud, that I felt unwelcome, judged, constantly evaluated, that his mother redid everything I touched, that his father's comments followed me all day, sitting heavy in my chest, that I felt like I was failing some invisible test I never agreed to take. Instead of feeling understood, I felt dismissed. He minimized it, explained it away, told me I was overthinking, told me that this was just how his family was, that I should try harder, be more patient, not take things so personally, especially because this trip mattered so much to him. That hurt more than anything his parents had said. Because in that moment, it felt like my discomfort was inconvenient. Like my feelings were a complication he didn't want to deal with. I realized I was expected to adapt, to absorb it quietly, to keep the peace, even if it meant shrinking myself. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of his parents moving around the house. I felt trapped, not just in the trip, but in the realization that I was alone in how I felt. I kept thinking, if this is how it feels before we're even engaged, what happens when this becomes permanent? The next day, he proposed. And instead of joy, the feeling that washed over me was confusion. The proposal happened in the middle of all that tension. We weren't alone. We weren't somewhere beautiful or meaningful to me. We were still surrounded by his family, in a place where I already felt watched and judged. There was no pause, no quiet moment to breathe, no sense of us. When he got down on one knee, I was shocked. Not in the fairy tale way, but in a disoriented one. I remember forcing a smile while my mind raced. Part of me was happy because I love him. Part of me was already exhausted. Another part of me felt like I was playing a role I hadn't chosen. His family reacted immediately, too loudly, too enthusiastically. They crowded the moment, talking over us, touching my hands, commenting on the ring, on how long they had been waiting for this. The space that should have belonged to the two of us disappeared in seconds. I didn't cry. I didn't feel that rush people talk about. I felt frozen. I said yes. Of course I did. But the word felt rushed, swallowed by everyone else's excitement. It didn't feel like the beginning of something sacred. It felt like the end of a long, uncomfortable performance. What hurt the most was realizing that my family didn't even know. They weren't included. They weren't part of this moment at all. It was as if my side of the world simply didn't exist. Later, when we were finally alone, I tried to make sense of what I was feeling. I told myself to be grateful, to focus on the ring, on the intention, on the fact that he wanted to marry me. But the truth was harder to ignore. This moment, the one I was supposed to remember forever, was built on anxiety, discomfort, and silence. And instead of feeling chosen, I felt absorbed into something that already existed without me. After the trip ended, nothing felt settled. Everyone around us acted as if the story had a perfect ending now. We were engaged. That was supposed to erase everything that came before it. His family spoke about wedding plans with certainty, as if the hardest part was already done. Friends congratulated us. People smiled. I smiled back. Inside, I was unraveling. The memory of the proposal was inseparable from the memory of feeling small. From being corrected, monitored, quietly judged. From realizing how easily my discomfort had been brushed aside for the sake of keeping things smooth. I couldn't think about the ring without remembering the house, the tension, the silence I swallowed to keep the peace. I started feeling anxious about the future in ways I hadn't before. Not about him, but about everything that came with him. About holidays, visits, expectations, boundaries that had never been set. I kept wondering how many times I would be asked to adapt, to compromise, to stay quiet, while everyone else felt at home. What scared me most was that this was supposed to be the beginning. The engagement wasn't just a question asked on one knee. It was a signal of how our lives would merge, whose comfort would come first, whose family would take up space, whose feelings would be negotiated, and whose would be minimized. I didn't regret saying yes. I loved him deeply. But love didn't erase the unease. I realized that if I didn't address what I was feeling now, if I kept telling myself to get over it, it would follow us into our marriage, quietly, persistently, growing heavier with time. So I stopped pretending I was fine. Because an engagement shouldn't feel like something you survive. It should feel like something you step into, together.